So this is very, very, very informal. I just ask that you guys mute yourself until you have a question or something, and that when you have a question, you can raise your hand and I'll recognize you. There's a button on your screen to raise your hand. This will be just me telling you literally what I see on the land. Things are changing. I guess I want to start there. I guess I'll start there before we jump off anyplace else. And that is, you should know that Israel has been in a 50-year drought. So let me get up my computer and I'm going to show you some statistics here. Okay, this is being added the day after the Zoom meeting because you will see, and you saw in the video, that they had changed the website. That really bothered me. So I did some investigating today and I found the chart that I was talking about, and I didn't want you to see it. I'm going to share it with you now. Okay, so this is the chart right here, and the dates are right here. Now I said 213 is the right number, is that low critical line that they don't like to see us get below. Not 230, 213. If we start over here in 1966, you can see we had some real highs and lows. Had some pretty good, rainfall variances. But right here in about 1990, which we're in 2020, there has been a significant decline in the amount of rainfall we have had during these years. If we look at this red line right here, you'll see that we've had many, many dips that didn't exist before. What year is this? 1991. So this is 2020, and if we go back to 10 years to 2010, you will see that all of our barley records, 20 years, go back to 2000, all of our barley records that have been collected have happened as the water was not as high as it had been. And indeed it was in 1967, 68, right here at the beginning of 68, where it went above the top line, and there was flooding. There was flooding on the shore of the Galilee there, with some houses on the bank. So I wanted just to put this as an inset into the video because I did find the chart, even though they had rearranged the same website and put it in a new location. I was able to find it, and did want to share it with you so that you could see that every one of our records that we have available to us about barley inspections have happened in these years. And then suddenly, we move the chart over, if I can, make it smaller. And then suddenly, this year, we jump back up right to the normal range. This is the danger line. This is when we flood, and the lake was just full this year. It's dropped a little bit coming into 2020 as we came out of the rainy season, but now it's going back up. It's filling back up with the rains, and we'll see where we go this year because it's certainly an unusual year. We have been in an all-time 50-year drought. It has been since 1967 that the Kinneret has been full. There are 3 lines that we have marked for stages on the Kinneret. Now the Kinneret is below sea level, so all of our stages are a negative number. The negative number goes to around, I think it's at 230 is the critical low. 230 below sea level is where they shut all water pumping off out of the Kinneret. So for those of you who've not been with me before, let me tell you that the Kinneret is our largest water aquifer in all of Israel. We have 3, and it is the Kinneret and the basin underneath the Kinneret that holds the most water in all of Israel. Additionally, we have a treaty with the country of Jordan, and Israel has been required from this treaty to pump the water from the Kinneret and supply it to Jordan. Well, that means 2 things. It means that we're given the good water, the living water that flows through the bedrock and is the snow melt off Mount Hermon. We're giving that away to Jordan. And during these, especially the end of these 50 years, Israelis have been drinking desalinated water. And it was so bad, it was so low, it was so in danger that in the last 3 years, our government was building, or let me say, rerouting the pipes that they used to use to carry the water from the Kinneret to other places in Israel. They were rerouting it to bring desalinated water into the lake. So the interesting thing about the Sea of Galilee, it is a freshwater lake. However, because it comes from groundwater and it comes from these watersheds from Mount Hermon, when these water tables get too low, the salt rises in the Kinneret, and it will cause the ecosystem of the lake. We have freshwater crabs, not crawdads, I mean crabs. We have shells, mollusks. We have all of these things that you would like see in a sea in the Kinneret, and they're fresh water. And so when this water table gets way too low, that is at risk of being totally disrupted. So these years that we have had very diligent people doing inspections in Israel, all of the records and all of the patterns that they've developed by keeping those records have been achieved in years of drought. In this previous year, we had so much rain and the lake was so replenished that we were, there was lots of discussion about, are we going to open the dam that flows from the Kinneret to the Jordan? Are we going to open the dam? Because in 1967, there's just a couple of houses on the lake from periods when you could actually buy property on the lake. You can't buy property on the lake now, but I'm talking about old property. Some of those houses flooded in 1967. And so we were talking about last year, are we going to have to open the dam, you know? And it got crazy close to a couple of these houses that had previously flooded. It got crazy close to flooding them, but we didn't open the dam. But this is the first year since 1967 that we have seen this much rain in Israel. There's also plenty of rain so far this year. When it has rained, the rain has not been spread out, like instead of getting rain 3 times a week, what has been happening is there have been times that we will get almost a month's worth of rain with 3 rains in that month. Okay, so in other words, instead of getting 3 rains and letting the ground soak it in, and no, we're getting 1 heavy rain a week, and those heavy rains are sometimes even surpassing the rains from the same period of the previous year. So we're getting plenty of rains this year. And I do have, if I can get it up, pray that they did not change their website too. Let's go here. I do have a place that you can go and watch the rainfall in Israel if you're so interested to do so. Let me come over here. Israel Meteorological Society. And this is all interesting information. In the long run, what we're looking at is what the barley is doing. As we've talked about, a lot of things affect the barley. We've talked about the sun before the video started, but also how much rain also affects the barley. You know, let me just turn this off real quick. It could be the VPN. I didn't think about that. Let's see if I can open that. Okay, now let's try that. Oh, how about that? We'll try that other link for the Canara too. How about that? It was the VPN blocking it. Okay, so over here you've got how much it rained today, how much it rained yesterday. You've got a daily rainfall report. So let's just look. It rained a little bit here today and last night, not much, but let's just look. So what you're looking at here, whoops. Her in, get this out of the way. Daily reports. Okay, here's your daily report. So for instance, right here in Naharia, I want you to look, this is what I'm talking about, how the rain is falling differently this year. The percentage of the same period average. This time last year, Naharia has received 56% of the rainfall. And in fact, they're at 57% of their average rainfall. And we just have, if we just look down through here, we just can see many,
Becca,
yes.
can I interject for a second?
Absolutely.
Could you reshare your screen because we're not seeing anything?
Oh
right
my
now.
goodness, absolutely. Let's do that again. Let me get rid of that. Hang on, ready to go? Let me shut this down low and we'll put this back up. Let me know if you don't see this. Can you see that?
Yeah, I can. Thank you.
Okay, here we go. So you didn't see Naharia. Naharia is at 250%, 256% of the same period last year. So they have had 256% more rain than they did in the same period last year. And then I was showing you, they're at 57% of their average annual total. So the rains are falling very differently in these last two years than they have before. And when we look down through here, most of these places noted are over 100%, above 100% of the same period from this time of year, the normal. They're above the normal. Okay, so one of the things that I do with this chart is I'm coming down here and I'm looking at the breadbasket area. The breadbasket rests against Gaza, and that's where the best wheat and the barley commercially and wildly grows. And I'm looking who's got rain. Let's look here, see if I can find one here real quick. Like Drought. Drought is a good place for barley. They're at 146% of the above the average rainfall for the same period in this time of year. 146% above. So I'm looking at these numbers and I'm saying, okay, which one has rain, which one has good temperature, and which one is most likely to begin to mature the barley the quickest. Now let's just see if I can go back and get this screen open. Okay, so that's important because what we're seeing this year on the development of the land, what I'm seeing is actually affecting what I'm seeing. I mean, it's saying it double, but I mean, it's a different year. I'll get my notes out here so I can. And I want to tell you, and in a year where we were working with a regular, let's call it a drought, like we've had for the 50 years, I'm always slow to predict what I think will happen. I prefer to see, because I live here, I prefer to see what's going to happen. Okay, normally when the year kicks off, the first thing out of the ground is the wild mustard. This year we had this crazy little plant. Get my photos up. Screen share. This year we had this crazy little plant show up, and you're not going to be able to see it if I blow it up very big. But this was the first thing popped out of the ground. And this popped out of the ground after that. We had 1 week of just heavy rain. And that 1 week we made up for all of the rain we hadn't had. And as soon as the sun came out and everything heated back up, because you need to know in Israel, if it's raining, it's cold, and it's overcast, it can be cool. And if it's not, it warms back up because we're the desert. And as soon as the rain stopped and the sun came back out, these guys popped up. And this was November the 7th. Well, I have since learned, if the screen doesn't stay with me, with you guys, let me know. I have since learned that that was mallow. I never saw the mallow seedlings before because I'm used to seeing the mustard seedlings first. That's always been, this has always been my indicator that the green season has kicked off. I didn't get that this year. I got this 5 years and I got this, okay? Let me go back over here. Why won't you go back over there? Okay. I'm going to see if I can find the bigger picture here. We'll come back to some of these pictures. They're not in order. I tried to make them in order. Okay, so this is what came up. Those little bitty seedlings that were breaking the earth. This is what they were. Every one of them were mallow. Every one of them. And this is what they look like today. So this is from November the 7th until today. Now, the really interesting thing this year was the mallow broke the surface on the 7th, which I believe, I was going to go back and check. Somebody with a better memory than me, wasn't that the morning after we saw the last new moon? Wasn't that the night of the 6th? I forgot to check that. It was very close to the new moon for this month, for this lunar cycle, when these things broke the earth. And the very next day, I started seeing the wheat and the barley breaking the surface. It was quick. I had never seen it this quick. Usually there's a lag of, I don't know, a week or so. I didn't write it down. I don't record it. I know the timing of it, but I don't write anecdotally the exact timing of it. Why? Because ultimately we're looking for ripe barley. And I don't want to make a religion out of saying if this, then that. Because as we've just witnessed, we didn't get mustard first this year. We got mallow first this year. Okay? So going forward in this whole land development thing, it was in 2016, which was 4 years ago. I refer that to that year as the year of the mustard. This was my first year of truly inspecting the barley. I had done it a little bit the year before, kind of after the fact, when I become aware that You know, we needed to be paying attention to these things, and the greater barley inspections had already happened. I got in on the tail end of some of it and verifying that indeed the barley was truly ready for a first fruits offering. So 2016, I started from the beginning. And in 2016, that was the year of the spinach. I'm sorry, mustard. The Bible talks about the mustard has the smallest grain of all, but yet it becomes a tree that the birds of the air could roost in. That doesn't happen every year, but it happened in 2016. In 2016, I'm 5'5". The mustard was taller than me, and it was woody, and it was bushy, and it looked like a small tree or a brushy plant. Tall, brushy plant. In 2017, it was the year of the thistle. I don't know the scientific name, but it's the one that's related to the artichoke. It was the year of the thistle, and I got to watch the Bible talk about the parable of the sower. Some sown on off the path and the birds eat it. Some's on hard ground. Some's in the thistles, which are the cares of life, and they come along and they choke it out. That year, every place that I had looked at the barley before that got choked out by the thistles. I got to watch that happen, but it was the year of the thistle. In 2018, it was the year of the arugula. We have wild arugula in many places, going south from the Sea of Galilee and Bet Shean, all up and down the road between here and there. And arugula was everywhere, and they bloom a beautiful white flower. And there was a carpet of white flower during this time all over the countryside. So that was the year of the arugula. In 2019, last year, it was the year of the oats. 2018, it was a little bit too. I mean, there was a lot of oats, but it wasn't like 2019. It was literally the year of the oats. It was literally hard to see the barley because the oats, which come on strong and fast, they have a shorter cycle. They shot up high out of the earth, and we had all of that water, and they're water loving. Not only are they water loving, but they withstand being wet and in drenched soil better than the barley did. The barley became yellow and feeble and weak and didn't do much. It stayed short because of too much water. It didn't bother. The oats, they shot up tall. They loved it. And so it was hard when you were driving to see barley because of the oats. This year is the year of the mallow. Well, why does this make any difference? Because we have to watch the land, and we can look at these things and we can notice these things, but ultimately we need to be watching the barley. Now this year, I'm going to tell you that for all intents and purposes, we're super, super, super early for what's going on the land. Actually, this is a good place to pause. Does anybody want to ask any questions to this point about anything? Just unmute yourself, and we'll just whatever you want to ask at this point about what I've said, please feel free to ask. Nothing? Okay, that's fine. That's cool too. Okay, so on the property here, many of you know I've been working on turning it into a forested garden. I believe I'm following what God has asked me to do, what Jehovah has asked me to. And so in part of that process, I've been planting. Every week I plant something new. Last week I planted gooseberries, I planted yellow raspberries. I planted, what was the third thing? Black currants. And I buy them from a lady here that I met on the internet in one of the gardening Facebook groups. And I won't give you her name, but she is a very nice, now, very nice Orthodox lady. And she, when you buy one of her plants, she'll deliver. She comes around usually Friday morning with whatever you've ordered, and she hands you your plants. You know, we're in this crazy time of COVID. And so to bring your plants, she'll deliver them, she'll leave them, give her the money, and you plant them. So rewinding this story a little bit more, I had bought from her before, back in the beginning, when I was just putting the pine mulch on the property here. I put green pine mulch, stems to bark, pine needles to bark, on the property. This is going into the third year of having it on the property. The first time she came, her husband was very kind and expressive and had good things to say, and she was very like, well, if you don't get termites, and if you don't buy, and if you don't, and so she was just very negative about the property. But the last two times she came, last week, we'll start with last week, when she delivered the raspberries, the currants, and the gooseberries, she wanted to talk about the weather and what's going on in Israel. She was talking to me about things like the solar minimum. And I was talking to her about things like, yeah, but look, the migration has started into Hula Valley. We're seeing the crane already. Look, the barley and the wheat are up, you know. And so she's talking to me about what she sees or what she knows about the heavenlies. And I'm already talking to her about the biblical calendar. And she's not even aware of it yet. And I showed her, I said, look, that's the black wheat. The black wheat's up. And look, I found the red barley in Raim, and there's a row of it right there. Almost that was the wrong thing to say, you know, praise God that I had put wooden dividers and borders around everything to keep them well marked and separated. She says, how close are they planted together? And I said, well, not close. I said, not only that, you can't see because the mallow's so big, but they're divided. There's a boundary around that wheat. They're not going to mix because the wheat's planted on one side, the barley's planted on the other. So all of these wonderful conversations are happening, but she's saying it's got to freeze, it's got to be cold. Now, before I make the next statement to explain what she's saying to me, if you've not followed what I have used from the Bible, when I talk about the biblical calendar, I try to stay true to the terms that the Bible used, understanding how they were used and what they meant when they used them. We don't find anything other than King James English in the Bible that speaks of summer as a season and winter as a season. When you think of summer, you get this picture of having a park, a picnic in the park with green trees and green grass and maybe a pond and ducks and baseball and children playing on swings. From that perspective of that, summer does not exist in biblical Hebrew. Summer, which is kites in Hebrew, means everything about harvesting grains. Okay, kites means harvest, kaitzer, the harvest as in the noun kaitzer means the action of the cutting of the harvest. That's what it means. And there's another definition for winter is horaf, and it doesn't mean raining and cold, blustery cold blowing wind, ice on the trees. It doesn't mean any of these things that if you're in a four-season area, you get these mental pictures of. It has to do with the time we strip the land and get ready for planting the grains again. But within that understanding, modern Israel in their modern Hebrew will use the words fall, winter, spring, and summer. So I want to give you now how Israel, modern Israel, applies those words. Summer is any time from probably Sukkot onwards. I'm not sorry, back up. It's probably from Shavuot onwards, when everything on the land is starting to turn brown again. After Shavuot, after the grain harvest, all of those beautiful green plants start to die and go back to brown, crunchy, dusty, dry until next year in the green season. And there's very, very, very few green things on the earth. That's the summer. When they talk about spring, it's usually that time of year when it's raining and the green things are starting to come up out of the earth. When they talk about fall, it's usually when the 106 to 115 degree weather has begun to diminish and cool down, and we're headed back towards the rain. And the plants usually tell you, this is a sidebar, the plants usually tell you before the sky does, because they just know. When the trees that are deciduous, they start dropping their leaves. They just know. Winter usually means the front end of the cold rains, when the trees have dropped their leaves and before the green things are coming up in the modern Hebrew. So this lady says to me, yeah, but we've not even had winter yet and we're already in spring. But look, we've got barley and wheat. But look, we've got the migration of the birds. But look, the crocuses have already come up. Okay, so that was our conversation last week. This week I had her deliver me, what did I have her deliver? Chestnut tree and egg fruit. What is that called? Castelline, or I don't know, but it's an egg fruit tree. It's one of the exotic trees even for here for Israel. And I had her deliver me those, and she brought them. Oh, and she said, but back to the previous week, she said, let me know. I want to know if your raspberries ever shed their leaves, your raspberries or your gooseberries ever shed their leaves, because they're supposed to be deciduous and they're supposed to shed the leaves, but they were already budding out again. If you looked on the tips of the new growth, go here. See if I can share them with you real quick. You see right down in here, new growth. Go over here. There's the gooseberries, new growth. Maybe I didn't photograph the other ones. So there's already new growth. So she said to me, if they lose their leaves, if we get a cold snap and they lose their leaves, let me know. I want to know. I said, sure, I'll let you know. So this week she comes back. She brings my trees. And now she's saying, we're going to get cold this week. We're going to get cold. We might get a reset. This may be a false start. We've got to wait and see. Everybody's talking about, it's springtime, and it's not time for it to be springtime. And we've got to have some kind of cold. All of Israel, the farmers, the gardeners, the nurseries, all of them know that something is different this year that they have not seen. Referring back to last year now, I have a neighbor, Yudit. She's a kibbutznik, and that means that She comes from the Wayback Machine. She grew up on a kibbutz, and she still kind of lives like that in her little house on her little lot. She gardens and keeps chickens. And Judith said last year, we had flowers we had not seen. People couldn't remember the last time we'd seen the flowers that bloomed because we had so much water. Judith said that she was a child the last time she had seen Israel this green. So we're looking at a time currently that we're not so familiar with. Okay, so now I'm just going to screen share and go through some of these pictures with you. Get over here to the beginning one. Okay, that was the beginning one. That one is, okay. You seeing photos? Okay.
Yes, we see them.
Okay, so one of the things that I've been privileged to do to expand the knowledge of how things respond in Israel and in the land here in the earth is I'm doing some gardening with a friend of mine. He's begged me for, as he's watched my garden, what it's become, he's begged me for about 3 years to go to work with him, so I have. This time of year, the roses should be going dormant. So 2 weeks ago, we were working in a garden and I pruned back the roses and I stuck them down in the earth, and they're already leafing out. Benny sent me a picture of this garden. All of the roses that I pruned are covered with the most beautiful roses. The roses did not go dormant this year. These are my Thai soldier beans. They're about, they average about 12 inches long. These have been blooming and are still blooming and are still growing. They've been since, let's say, May or June of last year. They've never stopped. As well as the ones I had planted for this season, they're coming up. Okay, this is the papaya, it's a pawpaw tree actually, pawpaw tree. You can see that it's still blooming at the top. Normally what happens, and I'm getting just a teeny bit of this, is as it gets cold, these new pawpaws, they won't make it. Next year, this will be a bare area on the stalk and it will start blooming higher up as it gets taller. But in addition, let's see if I can find it. Whoops, thought I had one of the later fruit, maybe not. Well, in addition, the fruit at the bottom is still ripening. Okay. This is my pomegranate tree. Never went dormant. As soon as I pruned it, it started leafing out again. Same thing with my citrus trees. I started pruning them for the cold weather when they should be dormant, and every one of them are leafing out again. That's just the egg fruit tree. That's the gooseberry. That's the raspberry. Wait a minute, is that the raspberry? Yeah, that's the raspberry. This is the, what was the other one? This is the currant. Okay, this tree right here, this is called I always forget the name of this tree. It's absolutely drop dead gorgeous. People stop and take a picture of it when we have tourism because it's so beautiful when it blooms. It's a coral tree. It's the one that has thorns. Last year, the thing hardly bloomed at all. Usually it's just this brilliant display covered with these blooms right here. In fact, that's some of the few seed pods from last year. I took a photo of the tree with one bloom on it today. My jacaranda trees, or jacaranda, depending on what you prefer, they had blooms on it for 3 or 4 months. And in fact, until the heavy rains came, it didn't knock the last 2 or 3 blooms off of it. The lady that brought me the trees said that her apple trees are already in bloom. Mine are not, but her apple tree is already in bloom. This is my fig tree. I pruned it back and it's already budding. Already budding. You can see the new growth on the tips here. Everywhere, it's new growth. This is last year's Swiss chard that was in seed 2 months ago, and it's already so tall it's outgrown its hoop. It's pressing up against the netting. The nasturtiums are already coming back up all over the land. The crocus is there. Okay, there's my papaya tree, my pawpaw tree. You can see that even though the top is looking kind of like it's not going to make it with the new pawpaws, the bottom is still ripening. I've never seen this. What I have seen that is normal is that pawpaw tree will load itself with new fruit. And then the top will go dormant for winter. And then when we go into a new growing cycle, last year's fruit will ripen. The stuff that you see ripening now, that is fruit from the current growth, Normally that would not be ripe until next year. This is Hollyhock. You know that they're from the okra family. They like hot weather and they're already germinating. The cyclamen, they grow wild in Israel. They're already breaking the earth. That I don't do anything to bring these up. They're already breaking the earth. The crocus, the ones that I have in my yard that I brought in from the wild, they've already come up. They're starting to come up over the earth, all over the earth. So what am I saying to you? I'm saying that we are way ahead. If just like the rainfall, from where we were at this time last year, okay, we're abundantly above and beyond. That's what I'm saying to you. What I'm not saying to you is we're going to have an early year. What I am saying to you is that the land is developing early. I want to just show you one more picture here if I can. Screen share. First, let me see if I can get this up over here because I'm going to have to do it from here. All right. So what happens when we get to this time of year? We have these heavy rains, and then we don't have rain for a while. The plants and the tree life and the ground begin to release that extra moisture, and it becomes hard to get a scenic picture, a scenery picture, because you get this haze, this almost like an exhale from the land. So this may not be very clear, but I've got enough pictures that we can get a good look. So let me move it just a teeny. Here we go. Okay, so it looks green-gray, but it's not. That's the haze I was telling you about. If I pull this down a little farther, you can look right here. This is last year's old growth that never got blown down, got beat down by rain because of the quick turn coming back towards warm that we've had this year. And this same color here actually covers that whole valley and ridge. And in fact, let me get you, this is the true color of it right here. This is what that whole valley and ridge truly looks like. That's the true color right there. By the way, all of this right here that looks like grass is not. It's either barley and or oats. Same thing here. This is an empty area in the village, in the center of the village. All of this is either barley and or oats. We technically don't have lawns in Israel. If you see something that looks like a lawn, it's probably astroturf, seriously and literally. Here's another location. All of this is wild barley and wild oats. So, and you're looking at, what is this, December 6th, I think? What is, I don't even know the date today. This is very, very early. It was just about this time, I think last year, that I was seeing it coming from the earth. This is the Golan. Again, you've got that haze, so it's hard to see. But all of these raised areas on the edge of the Golan, all of them are just that beautiful, brilliant green. Okay. So that's really what I've got to tell you. I didn't come to tell you that I know what's going to happen. I come to tell you, I think we're seeing some things we haven't seen before. I will share a couple of verses with you that'll show you why I think we're seeing some things we haven't seen before. If we go to, let me get you sorted up. Oops, where did it go? Not there. Try again. Not there. Try one more time. Oh, well, it didn't open, that's why. Here we go. Okay. Okay, so we want to go to Ruth 2, and we'll go to 23. 22 and 23. Let me see if I can shrink this a little bit because I cannot see, personally, I cannot see all the words. Okay. Start with 21. And Ruth the Moabitess said, he said unto me, thou shalt keep fast by my young men until they have ended all my harvest. All my harvest. And Naomi said unto Ruth, her daughter-in-law, it is good, my daughter, that thou go out with his maidens, that they meet thee not in any other field. So she kept fast by the maidens of Boaz to glean until the end of the barley harvest and the wheat harvest, and dwelt with her mother-in-law. So the whole harvest time is barley and wheat, because as soon as the barley finishes ripening, we go into the wheat harvest. Barley has us, 3 things come up at the beginning of the year: wheat, barley, and the ones that I look at on the land. I'm sure that there's rye out there because the Bible talks about rye, but I've never tried to identify it. But 3 things come up that I look at: wheat, barley, and oats. Wheat, barley, and oats, they all come up at the same time. If you go to the YouTube channel, when these first broke the earth, you'll see me out there digging in the dirt to prove that I check the grain attached to those little blades of grass to make sure that I know what I'm saying and that I'm saying something that's true. They all come up at the same time. Wheat has the quickest barley, Oats have the quickest cycle. Oats will be ready before the barley. We don't do anything with the oats, but we know basically from experience that when the oats are starting to drop, shed their seeds, that we're just right at that time that we need to really be watching the barley, because it's going to start turning and get ready real quick now. So we just kind of recognize it as a marker. Then what comes is the barley, and it will be ready in time, ready as in biblically acceptable to make a wheat offering, in time for the week of unleavened, for the wave sheaf. And if that's correct, by the time we get to Shavuot, then the wheat will be finished. Not beginning, finished. Until the end of the barley harvest and wheat harvest. It was his harvest season. Okay, so those 7 weeks include the barley and the wheat. Going to Joshua 3:15 now. And I want to show you how it was at that time. Because during those 20 years of records that we had during the drought, what was normal is that we didn't see rain once we got into the first month of the year. Last year, according to watching the 7 species, which are the 7 acceptable first fruits offering for the temple, last year, according to the calendar that represented them, we did have rain, occasional rain, up until almost Shavuot, just before it. This is what it says in Joshua 3:15, and I can't see it again, so I'm going to shrink it. And it came to pass when the people removed their tents and passed over the Jordan that the priests began bearing the Ark of the Covenant before the people. This is when Joshua brought the nation of Israel across the Jordan River to possess the land of the Canaanites. And as they bear the ark, and as they that bear the ark were coming to the Jordan, and the feet of the priests that bear the ark dipped in the brim of the water, for the Jordan overfloweth his banks all the time of the harvest. Ruth told us what all the time of the harvest was. It's the barley and the wheat. So here we have a record in Joshua 3:15, when the Israelites, the nation of Israelites, were living this new covenant-pleasing life. There wasn't the sin that had separated and caused the curses of lack of rain to come into their lives. When they were in this time of newness and he was blessing them, the Jordan River overflowed its banks all of the harvest season, all of the 7 weeks, starting the week of unleavened of barley until Shavuot. We're told the same thing in 1 Chronicles. I'm 12. 15. These are they that went over the Jordan in the first month, when it had overflown all of his banks. And they were put to flight, and they put to flight all them of the valleys, both towards the east and towards the west. So for 18-20 years, those that have been diligently coming to Israel have not seen a time when we get rain, much rain, hardly any rain after that first month. But we did last year. And we see, because of this abundant rain, maybe God's doing a renewed thing. Maybe it's because of the abundant rain he gave. But the mallow beat the mustard up, and things are budding. and they didn't shed and die like they normally do. And we've got to watch. Another thing that my lady told me that delivers my plants, she said, in Jerusalem, which I'm going to watch that really close now. In Jerusalem, the thistles, the one I was telling you about, that look like the artichoke, are already waist high. That's very interesting. Normally thistles don't reach waist high in the north until Shavuot, maybe a little bit after. But in Jerusalem, they're already waist high. She said she was there last week. So what would normally happen after the grain harvests are finished is already happening in Jerusalem. So go ahead and unmute yourself. I can stop the record button if that makes you more comfortable. That's basically the report that I wanted to bring you about what's going on the land, and it's different than I've seen in 5 years. I would wager to say that it's probably different than those people who have been faithful to come and watch. Questions, anybody? Any comments or anything?
I have a comment, and it might be absolutely nothing, but the last time that we talked about things that are already starting to green out so soon, a verse came in my mind, and I think I shared it with you, and it's that pray that your flight not be in winter. And it's in my mind again. I don't know why it's in my mind, but I feel like it has something to do with this, and I don't know if it does or not.
Well, winter would be a time, winter is Horeth, and you know that Horeth represents the time that we're literally stripping the old plant life off of the earth so we can sow the grains for the next season. So that would be, Horeth starts in the 7th month. That's when we sow the grains. 7th biblical month.
Okay.
This is Glenn.
Man. Sure.
My understanding from scripture, and you mentioned 2 seasons, and I understood it to be that way, and it is different. I'm not sure what agricultural zone Israel is. I'm just familiar with my zone here in the U.S. is zone 5B. It's cold in the winter, in the true winter. But in Israel, the rainy season starts after Sukkot, and it's actually the planting season. And it'll go all the way until the summer, which basically starts the harvest season, which is Aviv 1 and on. That's my understanding.
But we just saw from scripture that it goes all the way through the harvest season.
Yes, the rains, well, what I'm getting at is the rains feed the green.
Mm-hmm.
When the grains stop, it causes hormonal changes in the plant to say, time to set seed.
Yes, it can, but it's not always that way.
No, and I know like this past year, wasn't there, I mean, the barley looked like it was ahead for a long time, and then it got really rainy. It sort of slowed things down a little, but then it caught up again when the warmth showed up and exponentially caused the growth to get to the point of an early ripening season. That's what I saw, correct me if I'm wrong.
Right, no, basically that's it. What we had with the heavy rain is that wheat is loves moisture more than barley, and we had enough rain that the barley was sickly and stunted.
Yes.
But then after we had that early heavy rain, what became sickly really shot up and took off.
Yes, from the heat and the sunshine that developed quickly.
But it also went ahead and rained a few more times too. Yeah. The heat, the rain didn't shut off at that point. So yes, to be very clear, these wild barley grains have like a switch inside of them, a God-given switch, that if the rains turn off, they're going to race to make a seed that will reproduce, something that it can cast to the earth and bring forth and, and have another harvest for the following year. That's the way that he made them. And to a certain extent, as long as it's raining, they put their energy in getting taller and not making a grain. However, with that said, there's, and I want to preface this because there's been a belief, probably because nobody has been in Israel full time, there's been a belief that this wild barley only has a 90-day cycle, and that's not true. I've seen the wild barley go 4.5 months in rain without that cutoff of heat and still make grains. Okay, so I'm not ready to tell you that it has a 4.5 month cycle cutoff. I'm not saying that at all. I'm telling you what I have seen. So yes, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. So being potential, what you're seeing is a sign of earliness, but that doesn't mean it necessarily means an early
not at all.
spring, because it could be delayed. And it'll just sit and wait, just like I see plants when the temperatures are below a certain point, or they're not getting their moisture or whatever, they'll just sit and wait.
Absolutely, you're right. And it'll depend on how much rain does he give it? What temperature does he provide it? All of these things, that's a full package. And he fine tunes it, and it's spectacular, miraculous, and wonderful to watch.
Yes, and he makes us wait for his time, and I love that.
That's it. Don't you love it?
I do. It's a miracle.
Yes, it is.
Now, the other thing you mentioned was the barley and the wheat. Typically, the season was to be harvested during that 7-week period. But again, I'm a little concerned with the wheat being harvested before the offering at Pentecost, so it shouldn't be harvested until that wave sheaf.
Okay,
Pentecost.
So let me ask you a question. Not to be just, I like people to have their own aha moment. So I'm going to ask you a question. What is offered on Shavuot? What is the literal offering on Shavuot?
A loaf of leavened bread.
2 loaves of leavened wheat bread.
Yes.
Okay, so if we harvest it the day before Shavuot, where are we getting the leaven from? Remember, everything has to be new. We couldn't offer anything from last year.
Yes, so it takes time to do that offering.
Yes, it does. Yeah, it does. Because if you look at the scripture, we have plenty of evidence to show us, even in the words of chametz, the leaven, that it was a sourdough process. And sourdough, it takes a little time to grow the yeast, whether you're using an external element like grape skins, or if you're catching wild yeast on the air. It takes some time to catch the yeast and leaven the bread, and grind the bread, and thresh the bread, and harvest the bread.
Okay, so they're not using an old source of sourdough, for instance.
It says it has to be new.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome. Nancy?
Couple of things. First of all, I want to go immediately back to your yeast thing. I watched you leaven with grapes before, and I did wonder, like, I'm using yeast and baking breads and trying to understand this better just by baking and trying to do things, from scratch to learn, but I still don't know where my little packet of yeast or my little jar of yeast comes from.
Oh, no, I don't know. Don't ask me. I don't know.
I'm wanting to do all these natural ingredients to be healthier. And I'm like, okay, but wait a minute, where did this yeast actually come from? And that ended up being a subject I think Father wants me to search out, because even earlier today, Some people that have some ducks are having issues with not having enough niacin in their feed. Now we do a flight developer, so it's specific to game bird, but they were trying to give yeast to their ducks and they were like, oh my God, don't do that, because some is just pure poison to them. So I said, this is something Father's putting on my table. The other thing too, that when I was listening to Glenn talk about, what, you know, he's familiar with what his area does, et cetera, then there was some explanation on why the barley could have been early this year. And I say, okay, that, you know, this is definitely the Father. And the reason why I know this is, as you know, I've been following wherever I have lived to find patterns here at the same time that you're finding the barley. So the one thing that I can say is, even though those rains happened in a certain way in the sun and the heat, how did my little yellow flowers pop up the exact same time? You know, the grass popped up in the first week of the 12th month, 3 years in a row. And then the bulb, the actual bulb of that flower is right on the first day of the first week of the first new year. And I said that, you know, it's Father when those things happen. But the other thing too is the budding of the maple leaf. You know, I got a maple leaf. I just noticed, I looked out and he's, don't forget me. I have the windows open, I'm looking out and I still have red maple leaves on my maple tree out here. But that's another thing too, is the budding of the maple leaf. If we pay close enough attention to our own surroundings, we'll find that everything is in the Father's timing, whether it's in Israel, all around, you know, the world, because he has his hand in it. And we'll find those patterns among us, not just in the land that's his, but everywhere.
I agree. Yes, I absolutely agree. When you will know, you can look, if you're in a 4-season area, feel free to use the word spring. You know when your spring is coming. You know when the crocuses come up. You know when the fig tree buds. You've got markers. You know when the year's coming early. Debbie, go ahead and tell us.
Okay, well, you know the paper white narcissus bulbs? My neighbor had some of those blooming the other day, and they don't usually bloom until January or February. And then my fig tree, it lost all its leaves, and I guess 3 weeks ago I noticed the little green chips on the end of the branches. It's starting to bud out now.
Mine's doing the same with 3 figs on it.
Yeah. So even though you're not necessarily in tune with what's happening here in Israel, you still are going to get almost a similar response where you live at, so that you know that this time, this season of reproduction, that time when everything's going to put on leaves, when the animals are going to, the birds are going to start building a nest, the deers are going to start having, you know, their babies, and all of these things, you know, you're approaching that season. It's not just Israel. I can look at Israel and I can know, and I report to you, but then I hear, doesn't matter. The last 2 years, I knew it was coming early. You know, I had one, my apple tree's already blooming, my apple tree's already blooming. I knew it was coming early. It's not just Israel that displays an early season change. It pretty much happens everywhere when it happens.
And it's not just the barley that tells us either, because like I told you, we saw the baby deer way before the norm here. And the lambs, when you go, well, I haven't seen the lambs yet. But yet I knew that we had the baby lambs early this year too. So
yeah, no, I saw Asher's lambs yesterday. Was it yesterday or the day before? He was out grazing them. And I didn't see, he was grazing them. So no, he wasn't, and he works his flock by himself. So if he had a lamb, if he had lambs on the ground, he wouldn't be out with the flock. So no, he's not started lambing yet.
But it's amazing that there's so many signs for Father to tell us. I mean, and we can't ignore them, because all year long he kept reaffirming with us that we were walking in the right time. And Becca, without you, we wouldn't have known that. So I'm so glad you are.
You know, you guys just pray for me, because this is uncharted territory. I mean, I don't care how you slice it. I'm hoping that those that have their patterns and records from the years of drought will, that the Father will open their eyes and show them that something new is happening on the land. But it wasn't me. It wasn't me. It was him leading me just to watch and report. That's all I'm supposed to do, is just watch and report and tell everybody what I see. Hi, Scott.
This
You got
view
one?
is-
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I had a question.
Sure.
Back in Genesis, in let's see here, Genesis 42:47, and this has to do with the Daniel's interpreting, Joseph's interpreting the Pharaoh's dream.
Mhm.
He put him in charge.
Mhm.
Then he said, then what it says here in 47 and 42 says, now in the 7 plentiful years, the ground brought forth abundantly. And then you had famine.
Right.
Okay, we bounce forward then to Revelation 11:3. And this is where God will give power to the 2 witnesses to prophesy for 1,260 days. 3.5 years is what we're talking about there. And then it also says they will have the power to shut the heavens so no rain falls during their prophecy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Would that time be preceded by abundance?
Good question. I couldn't tell you. I mean, I honestly couldn't tell you.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out if there's any, is there any connection between all this abundance, if plants are going to just almost be continually producing.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's interesting now, and I'm going to say this tongue in cheek, and I know that everybody has there's a lot of, let's just put it this way, there's a lot of people more established as far as in what they do on social media, on the internet, yada yada, than me, that have a lot of opinions out there. But one of the things that my friend that brings me plants and I talked about is, she says, well, maybe your fig tree is doing so well because she's just in awe of the property, and just very encouraging, and wants me to tell people in her forum what I'm doing, and encourage them that they can do it too. She said, well, maybe one of the reasons that your fig tree and everything is doing, and your passiflora is doing so well, is because not this year, next year is going to be the rabbinical Shemitah.
Ah, okay.
So all of this I take with a grain of salt. Scott, we have talked about this. I know that there are records, and I know that history, and I know that people have certain ideas, and God bless them. That's wonderful. But I'm looking, I believe with all my heart, since he displays his calendar to us from the earth here, he will also display those cycles to us on the earth, and it will be something we can't miss.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Go ahead, Nancy. I'm going to let you say it rather than read it.
Okay, I sort of wrote it out, but it was about the time that they were going to pass the gay marriage law, that the French president and John Kerry came out on stage and said, we had something like 352 days to climate chaos. And those dates really coincide with each other. And then we noticed the entire real heavy duty chemtrailing. And I believe you guys had that in Israel, not as bad as we did, but
occasionally, but not hardly at all.
Okay, and we had just the other day just noticed a HARP situation where you see like the rivets and the clouds, and we saw it more in Florida than we do in North Carolina as far as the HARP is concerned, because we're right off the Gulf Coast. But and we got to hear the explosions when they were doing some of these things. But anyway, long story short, what I have a thought of, and what some people have suggested, is that we literally were in a famine, so to speak, with rain. And the reason why they knew that Father was going to take away the rain was the world saying gay marriage is now okay. So they weren't sure what father was going to do,
Right.
but they knew there would be a repercussion based on what they were going to allow within all the nations. So when you look at that and you look at the pattern of those things happening, you know, the chemtrails, that's cloud seeding, it's what brings rain. What would change this year to suddenly give you all this rain and us all this rain and all this blessing of rain is quite a question, isn't it?
Well,
I mean,
you know, and let's just talk about one of the things that does dance in my mind, and I
Mhm.
ponder on it every once in a while, is the fact that we have been, quote unquote, in a 50-year drought, and suddenly, what's 50 years? It's a Yoville cycle.
Ah,
I don't know. I'm not telling you that I know it's Yoville around the corner, but a 50-year drought is 50 years is a Yoville cycle. That's the length.
wow. Wow.
Yeah, so that's something to think about, isn't it?
It's incredible. I mean, it's like so much is being revealed, and you just get kind of goosebumps when you just think about everything in a
Mhm.
whole. I mean, it's
Yeah.
been powerful to
Yeah.
watch it. And then for him to open up all this new stuff to us this year was not expected. It was
Yeah,
just not.
exactly. Wasn't expected for sure.
And
Yeah,
the affirmations were incredibly clear.
yeah,
They
they were.
couldn't have been more clear. And there were people that left that I would have, that followed you so well, and they listened and hung on and clung on to what was happening in the land, that just broke off. And I've been sad because, you know, I considered them as, you know, someone that would never.
Family.
Yes.
Extended family.
Yeah.
They are still extended family.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just a time of trying and testing as much for us as for them.
And he has put other people in my life that I've done, again, like you, don't even know where they came from, just showed up, just boom, they're there now. And diligently, you know, like just there, you know, just like constantly encouraging. So I know that it's him, because I'm not seeking, I have a big family, but my personal family, it is hard when you're struggling with personal things and personal relationships. And then Father just showed me again yesterday, it's like sometimes those that are blood related are not your family. You know, I'm giving your family, and I have to remind myself what Yosha said, you know, when he said, this is my brother, this is my mother, you
Yeah,
know.
that's right. That's right.
So,
Yeah. So John, do you want to just go ahead and turn your mic on, please, and say that? Maybe not. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn the recording off unless there's any more questions specific to the information I gave, and we'll just go ahead and continue with our conversation. Otherwise, anything on the pictures or Julie? No?
Oh, no.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I'll stop the recording.